Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. And today we are actually getting into a discussion in regards to it's more of a reaction video. In the last week or so, there's a content creator whose name is Destiny. I don't know if he goes by a longer name, but I know just in general they call him Destiny. Um, in the YouTube slash social media slash content creation space. He's an influencer, and he recently, in a week ago, it was stated that he's getting a divorce, or roughly, I'd say about a week ago. And the reason why we're actually covering this topic is because of the fact that he is someone who has very opposing of views to a more traditional setup, or even the pro man space, or what some people like to call red pill um, setup, or way of thinking or mindset, in regards to, generally speaking. And if we had to separate this to say red pill space means the extreme of what benefits men, and we say pro man space, which is what I try to promote, and I'm just giving these things definition here. Pro man space is more of just things that are positive or benefit the man, but don't necessarily hurt the woman, but it's just saying giving that man a better space and a better way of doing things to his betterment. And then we say the opposite end of that, which people would say blue pill space sometime, is the opposite of that, where the extreme opposite of that, where it's, everything is beneficial to the woman or whatnot. I believe that that's what that term means, if it means opposite of red pill space. And this, this this content creator here, Destiny, um, he has always had a viewpoint or a stance where, at least in his relationships and marriage, agreed that it was okay to be an open marriage on both ends of the field, as far as him being able to date other people, as far as her being able to date other people. And a lot of times within the social media or the podcast space, a lot of people would kind of go against his views and say they didn't agree with it, and it'd be a lot of debates. Usually, some friendly, some not, some respectful, some not, in regards to what he was doing, and in terms of saying that it doesn't really work, though he was saying that it does work. And now, pretty much, you have a situation where it's kind of fall flat on his face, because where he thought that scenario would work, his wife is now leaving him for someone that she was messing around with in their open relationship. Now, to give a little bit more context to the situation from what I know of, and I won't say that I know a whole lot on it, but generally speaking, and the point that we're going to get later on to the video is more the breaking down of how that viewpoint or that belief system doesn't really function in today's society. But just to give a little bit of context to it, so Destiny, I believe that the woman that he got with, I'm not too sure if she was from the States or not from the States, or just needed him for the purpose of coming over, or if it was a kind of situation where, whether it was like that, or whether it's not, but just, it was definitely a situation where he already was established as a man, in terms of his finances, in terms of his status. He was already established. And yeah, I'm not too sure if it was to the degree that he is currently, but he definitely was established to some degree, because I hear the relationship was 2 years long, the marriage. So at that point, I think he was already somewhat established by that point, as he has several million followers in the social media space. So um, it was a situation where she really didn't have much. Through his platform, through his influence, he helped build her up to have a social media presence, from my understanding, and she benefited from being with him, which is nothing wrong with that. But the dynamic of the poly relationship, and some people feel, I'm sorry, I don't even want to say poly relationship, open relationship on both ends. Um, some people feel that, he was okay with that because that's what she wanted. I'm not really too sure the dynamic on that. But in general, it goes to show that it didn't end up working out. Now, I've seen him on content before, specifically the Fresh and Fit podcast. I've seen him on the, I think it's called the Whatever podcast, and a few other things. And I've seen times where he's debated about saying that red pill or alpha men don't always get the women, or that's not what women want, or, just opposing that kind of red pill space, even a pro man space, just simply saying, okay, well, men should do certain things to better themselves and make it easier for them. He would sometimes even dispute that to say things along the lines of that, you know. No, a man doesn't have to do that because sometimes you have scenarios where women just get with men and X, Y, and Z. They aren't the alpha. They aren't this and that without taking consideration. Part of that argument was, well, what is the level of what those men are getting versus what the men who are alpha or dominant of their space or, whatever the case is, what are they getting? Because just because men are getting something doesn't mean they're getting what they want. And that was something he would never really take in consideration into his side of the arguments or disputes from what I've seen. So in large part, it really kind of went against, the way, you know, the majority who was in that space, in those kind of content space that he would debate in, because he likes to debate within the realm of the red pill space and kind of have that opposing view. A lot of people felt like it didn't really make sense and it didn't really add up. Now, some of the issues with his views is that it doesn't it goes against what's happening in the real world versus what he believes in. Um, so, so for example, the reality of it is women operate a certain way, men operate a certain way, certain traditional roles cause things to function on track, for lack of a better word. They really function, generally speaking, better. Um, and some people will be outside of that bubble, but for the most part, that's the function of things. Now, if you go and say, I don't believe in that, the truth is there's only one person, one type of guy who could say, I don't believe in that. And the other type of guys can't say that. The type of guy who can say that I don't believe in that is the person who's having success, or maybe they are like an alpha, maybe they are someone who has money, resources, whatever the case is, and they're getting what they want. And they might say they don't believe in that, or quote unquote, maybe they're oblivious to it because of the fact that it's almost like supply and demand. And when it comes to finances, a rich person is not going to understand or sometimes even believe in poverty to the level that it is because they're not the ones dealing with it. That same thing when it comes to the supply and demand of women. Guys who don't have to worry about that are not going to even consider that it's even something out there to a degree. Now, with that being said, a guy who actually is in the thick of it and has to try to make his way and is kind of more struggling as the average man normally does in this space. And like I've said previously on the channel, it has gotten worse for the average man because um, the dynamics of social media and everything like that has changed the game dramatically. And I'm not going to necessarily say pointing the finger at women, but they've evolved quicker with it, and the men have not evolved as quickly with it, which is why you have a lot of these content creation channels that are trying to promote men to take care of themselves better, be a little bit more mindful of their surroundings so they don't drown, and which is a very much a positive for society as a whole. I feel, at least, and a lot of other people agree with that. But with that being said, um, those guys, the average guy who's in the thick of it all, he has to operate in a certain way because he understands that, he is subjected to a lot of these things in terms of the way reality is versus, what he may wish it was in terms of how he's got to fend for himself, how he has to acting accordingly, not putting himself in vulnerable spaces, knowing that he could be being used or whatever the case is. So there's a whole lot of obstacles that he comes across. So when you have people like Destiny who got into his marriage or relationship after the time he already had money, he's breaking those same rules in that he already has money. So he doesn't have to necessarily um he doesn't have to necessarily or is not going to be caught up in that space where he's like, okay, I have to use the same tactics that the average person would have to use and figure out about navigating this. He had money, so the person was interested in him off the money because most people have agreed to say that they don't think he's particularly some very attractive guy. He's if anything, he's average, but with some weird tendencies that kind of would bring him almost below average. He colors his hair blue, has very, somewhat casual, I don't want to say feminine ways, but very casual, laid back ways that are not very aggressive and about being that kind of go getter mentality, at least in terms of the space of women. It's more so like thinking everything's very casual, but yet I think a lot of that relies on the fact that he has money, so he can have that attitude. And most people know in that kind of space that if you just have money, you don't have the personality that goes with it to attract the opposite sex. 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to just play you and use you for your money because you don't have that aspect of you that's naturally attracting them. They're only attracted to your resources. But I digress to say that the thing that got him in the door in the first place to even talk about that space of saying open relationships and this and that and his views is because he had money to actually get somebody as opposed to being your average guy trying to talk that talk. Because the most of the time, the average guy is not going to talk that talk because they're not experiencing benefit to that lifestyle. And so, if he was someone who didn't have that kind of money and resources and lived like the average or below average guy, he would not be able to keep with his personality type, be able to keep a woman. And at the end of the day, though, you might be able to get them off your resources, you aren't going to be able to maintain them off your views because your views um, completely go against the nature of what most women find appealing in a guy or what's gonna keep them, around, especially like I said, that sense of that a man is claiming you. I mean, there's so many even finite levels to this. Like, for example, another deeper, more psychological level to it is the fact that when you tell a woman she's allowed to, like, you have an open relationship with her and she's allowed to do whatever she wants and you can do what you want. Granted, you might think you're going to get the benefit of the deal because you're like, hey, I get to mess around with who I want. But the truth is, everyone generally knows that a woman will be able to get more guys then the man will be able to get women. And that's just the nature of the beast. But in addition to that, psychologically, you're telling that woman, I don't value you that much by not setting those boundary lines while you think it's okay to not have those boundary lines. In actuality, not having those boundary lines causes a problem because similar to a kid who says, I want they aren't going to say they want to be punished by their parents, but when they are punished by their parents, they know their parents love them. So the same way works for a woman where if you are not setting that boundary line, you're essentially saying, I don't care to lose you because I don't care what happens. And it's even worse, the fact that not only you're telling them, I don't care to lose you by you having whoever you want out there, but you're also saying, I value me being able to have who I want out there or extra on my plate means more to me than valuing the concept of losing you. So it's like a double hit and it lets that woman know, I really don't care if I lose you. And once you put that out there, and though some guys might try to disagree with that or whatever the case is, but essentially that is what's happening or what a woman's going to perceive that as, then even if they don't say it verbally, deep down emotionally, that's how it's going to be perceived. And what's going to happen at that point is you're essentially letting them know that you really don't care about them because you don't care to lose them because you are not valuing them. I say it akin to if you had $1 million, would you leave it in your car, with the windows down and walk away from your car? No, you wouldn't because you're scared to lose it. So the same thing with the person you're with, you're letting them know, I'm not afraid to lose you. So, so in that very way, that message puts that signal out. And for someone like Destiny actually thinking that he can maintain this woman, regardless of that, was a fool's errand to actually assume because he doesn't even have that kind of personality to command that. Now, say if you did have that kind of personality to command that, and the woman actually didn't want a poly, like relationship, and maybe you said it's open on my end and closed on your end, it takes a strong-willed person to be able to pull that off. And even in that scenario, the woman probably is not going to be happy with that scenario, though the man may have the power to pull it off. But somebody like Destiny didn't have that type of personality to pull that off. So now doubling back to the point and where we get with all this is that generally speaking, there are certain const- con- constructual roles that the genders play for the purpose of maintaining structure. And I've spoken with a lot of people who sometimes say, especially if they're benefiting in the world where they're one of those guys who get a lot of women, they'll go, none of that stuff matters. But the truth is that those roles are what keeps people in line for those who don't know how to stay in line without them. It's almost the equivalent of, I like to say, the 9 to 5ers in the work world. So you can have people who want to be artists and go live up the edge of their seat and see if they can make it in life. But if they don't, it's fine because society was still maintained by all the 9 to 5ers who keep the baseline of normal society. So all those people who want to play outside of the boundary lines, they don't realize they can only do that because the 9 to 5ers give them that leeway by keeping society together. The same thing works in the dating world. All those regular men who get with women and the average man, and I'm going to say average woman, who a lot of them sometimes don't think they're average anymore. When the men get with them, on a whole, on a bulk, like say if that's the majority of men out there, 60, 70% of men and 60 to 70% of women are just getting in regular, quote unquote, boring 9 to 5 relationships with each other. Those are the relationships that keep our world turning, that keeps the family dynamic, that gives that kind of more healthy structure for kids to grow up in. And though you have some people who will have some crazy dynamic relationship out there, those are not the relationships that create the homes that have healthy dynamics for children, healthy dynamics for long-term relationships. Those are more like experimental or fun or artsy relationships, if you want to call them that. They're like that artsy job or entertainment job that's not like the 9 to 5er that has highs and lows and all this kind of crazy dynamic to it. We have those type of relationships, and those are not what keeps society running. So though there are a lot of people who are anti a very conventional structured relationship, just understand that for those who are anti those relationships, you only get to have those anti 9 to 5 relationships by the fact that you have those 9 to 5 relationships keeping the world running, which gives you leeway to have some unconventional relationship. But if every relationship was unconventional, the whole system would fall apart. And a lot of people don't realize that and know that. So Destiny's teachings are not the way that anyone should be following because they are not conventional and they indeed cause the downfall if everyone did them, destruction of society. And like I said, I've actually spoken to people who will go and say, oh, they straight up believe in relationships that can be any kind of way. They could be poly, they could be open ended, they could be whatever you want to make them. But a lot of times, those same people who I talk with could care less whether the relationship destroys or blossoms because they say, oh, well, I don't care. Like, it's no sweat off my back. If it ends, it ends, and I move on to the next. Not realizing that that same mentality and dynamic is the definition of a broken household that doesn't have, we'll say, a happier, healthy atmosphere for especially when children are being raised inside that environment and go, okay, well, the parents don't mind breaking up at any given moment because no one feels connected with each other on that level or bonded where they actually feel like they have to stay because everyone's has this on the whim of, I don't care, I'll leave, I'll bounce, it doesn't matter because, like that's what it means. Just I'm being strong, I'm being whatever I want. And a lot of people have that loose mentality, especially when they have those kind of high dynamic relationships that are all over the place or not conventional. So that's just a little bit of food for thought with all that. With that being said, we're going to end the video. You guys comment, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, you guys be safe, take care. This channel is always about us bettering ourselves. So put down the comments below if you think that these thoughts are, if you oppose these thoughts, if you agree with them, if you think whatever it is that you might think. And with that being said, you guys, we'll catch you guys in the next video.